So here we can see all the adductor muscles. The biggest thing to note, the largest one is the adductor magnus. So that's this huge like muscle that fans out back here. So we're going to hide that one real quick. And then next we have all these little ones right here. So starting from the top, we have the pectineus muscle, adductor brevis, adductor longus, and then we have this little gracilis muscle right here. This muscle is a relatively weak adductor, but you still kind of just lump it into that group. Now, the main thing to note with these muscles is that, so the pectineus, adductor brevis, adductor longus, all of these three muscles originate on the anterior portion of the pelvis here. So what that means is not only do these muscles function as adductors, they also function as relatively weak hip flexors as well. So any movement where we're basically driving the leg from kind of this abducted position into adduction combined with hip flexion is really going to isolate these anterior adductor muscles. And you'll generally feel this like if you do any kind of the cable adduction exercises, where you're allowing the leg to abduct back behind the body to some degree, and then you're trying to cross that loaded leg in front of the unloaded leg, the one which would be the one that you're standing on. And then you definitely feel it more. You'll definitely get increased activation of these muscles as opposed to the adductor magnus. So the adductor magnus is your strongest adductor muscle, but it's also a relatively powerful hip extensor muscle as well. Generally, anytime you work any kind of extension exercise, whether it's, hip extension movements on like the GHD, the Roman chair, any kind of squat, split squats especially, you do work the adductor magnus to some extent. Probably one of the best exercises for working this, and this is kind of where you get into doing exercises that are a little bit more in the frontal plane, is when you do any kind of like sumo style like squat or especially deadlift. That's going to work this adductor magnus a lot. So in terms of like isolating this, same thing, kind of the opposite as the other ones. You're still abducting it, but it's going to be abducted out in front of you a little bit, and then you're basically going to extend and adduct the hip at the same time. And that's going to really work this adductor magnus muscle. In general, if you just focus on pure adduction, you're going to work all of these. So trying to like isolate one or the other group of adductors isn't going to, it's not going to make a huge difference in your results, but it's just something to consider, especially if you're having specific issues with something or you have to isolate one of them because it's weak because you injured it or something like that. That's something to consider. So the gracilis muscle, which is this long skinny one right here, this also, just because of its attachment point here on the tibia, it's also going to function as a relatively weak knee flexor as well. But regardless, so yeah, that's your adductor group, and those are the main ways to train it.